conversation with the school about what was working, what wasn't working. And when the list of what wasn't working was longer than the list of what was working, and the value that our child had and that we had as his family supporting him, the value was all in the stuff that wasn't working.
Mhm.
That was when we chose to withdraw. And I think that's as individual as we all are. But if anybody is at that stage, we do try to support people as our business. We build a community of a very non-judgmental space that says, that just acknowledges that this is where you are. It's a safe place to put that. This is what I'm considering, and try to help signpost people to the myriad of possibilities that are now out there. I don't think he was that anybody in the school intended for him to learn that he had no value, but that's how he felt.
Mm.
Is he had no value, he had nothing to offer, he couldn't tick the boxes, therefore he was naughty, he was in trouble, and it doesn't matter that you have these diagnosis and inclusion strategies, it doesn't seem to translate in practice. So we hit a bit of a crisis, and I wasn't prepared to let him slide any further down than he actually had. So looking at him one morning and realizing that he was in that place of not being able to come back out was just before COVID. During COVID, that's when we got to see him at home learning. And trying to instill a love of learning in our child had been a major challenge up to the age of about 6.
Hello, welcome back to Education on Fire. Today I'm delighted to be chatting to Victoria Lenormand, and she's the author of The Magic of Not Fitting In. Now, their story is that of a mum, a dad, their work, 2 sons and an autism diagnosis, the school, and a whole lot of questions about trying to fit in. Now, Victoria takes us on their journey of how their lives were changed in order to support their sons' learning, and this includes changes in their careers, education, location, and most importantly, how and why they live their life the way they do now. Hi, Victoria. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Education on Fire podcast. I think one thing everybody knows is that having the child, our child, any child at the centre of what we're going to be talking about on the podcast is the most important thing. And the other thing we talk about so much is how the education system per se is great for some small middle part of everybody's sort of community and the country, and then either end of the spectrum it doesn't work for so many people, and a lot of people are able to stay in it, but there are people who actually find other ways to do it. So I think your story and your journey is going to be a really fascinating conversation. So yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Mark. I'm really grateful to be here. I really am. Thank you.
So why don't you tell everybody where you are in the world first of all, because I'm not sure, or it's actually that's not sure, we haven't had a Scottish person before or someone living in Scotland, but I know it's been a little while. So yeah, tell us about sort of that journey and living there.
So, yeah, my journey started on the south coast of England. That's where I grew up, and I was schooled, and I started work in law enforcement. I ended up moving to Guernsey in the Channel Islands, and then with an education system that wasn't fitting my child's needs at that particular point. So he was diagnosed with SEND. Um, we ended up having a massive rethink about how we did life. So we have 2 sons. Our eldest went straight through education system, ticking various boxes, loving the arts, absolutely loving the arts. So I have 2 very creative boys, but differently creative. And he found his way through with most of his interest being extracurricular until he hit A levels and then university for musical theatre. That was our eldest. At the time that he was heading to university for musical theatre, the our youngest was really struggling to the point of mental health crisis in trying to fit, desperately trying to fit an education system. And my husband and I were struggling trying to meet the need and the fit and just trying to keep a happy little boy, really, because I think that's what most of us aim for when we put our child at the very center is, are you happy? Are you healthy? Are you thriving? And that's what they were the questions we were asking. We weren't able to tick those boxes for him up to about the age of 6. So we had diagnosis at 3, sensory processing, autism, possibly some other things to be considering as well. And as we know, it's a huge spectrum. It shows up differently for everybody, but our child just could not sit still, really understand what was required of him in class, was learning all the things that weren't intended to be taught him. I don't think he was that anybody in the school intended for him to learn that he had no value, but that's how he felt.
Mm.
Is he had no value, he had nothing to offer, he couldn't tick the boxes, therefore he was naughty, he was in trouble, and it doesn't matter that you have these diagnosis and inclusion strategies, it doesn't seem to translate in practice. So we hit a bit of a crisis, and I wasn't prepared to let him slide any further down than he actually had. So looking at him one morning and realizing that he was in that place of not being able to come back out was just before COVID. During COVID, that's when we got to see him at home learning. And trying to instill a love of learning in our child had been a major challenge up to the age of about 6. It's been such a challenge for everybody involved. You know, there are groups of people and services. We're not entirely on our own at that point, but we certainly were when we decided to say this isn't working. And I don't think with the very best intentions that are here that it is actually going to improve. I think it's we've I feel like I'm banging my head against a brick wall and now it just hurts.
Yes.
So maybe I need to find a door. I needed a door. So we opened a different door when we looked at him with the lessons that were coming home during that period of time and how quickly he was able to meet the academic requirement within a couple of hours in the morning and then understand that the day was his. He very quickly crafted his own day. And I could see the benefits of him having some autonomy around his learning and his choice around, I'm doing the bit you want. Now I'm off to explore. And that's when he lit up. That's when you could see this little buzz, this little spark that was uniquely him actually came to life. And there was exploration and discovery and a multitude of questions that he could ask at home that he couldn't do in a classroom because he's interrupting. And I thought, actually, we might need to rethink here and meet that need until maybe he's old enough to have a little bit more self-control. Maybe that will come later. And we're okay with that as his
Yeah.
parents. We're okay that it would come later, but our system isn't. It's not that the teacher wasn't, it's just our system doesn't allow for it. So that's why he's constantly being graded down. And you think, "Oh," and it's making you feel awful. So that's pretty much our story. We ended up, you asked how we ended up being in Scotland as we moved over here with our eldest for university. He came to Glasgow for university, and we decided to really bite the bullet, rented out the house, left employment, moved into a motorhome,
Wow.
and brought our youngest with us because there was a certain amount of security that came with having the motorhome as his home. So in our book, I've drawn it as like a snail. He's like a snail. He's taking his house with him, and that brought the security. And then he could explore freely. So we made exploration the learning journey so that he could start to enjoy it a little bit more and find a love of learning. I mean, I have it. I love to learn. It's yes, it's challenging. Yes, it's got issues, but to watch him struggle with that was really hard for me to witness, is that he couldn't find a love of learning. And I thought, okay, we'll change it. So we moved, came to came to Glasgow to drop off our eldest, ended up touring around Scotland, and our youngest just fell in love with Scotland. And 3 years later, we made a permanent move.
Amazing.
Mm,
and
mm,
and I think the biggest sort of takeaway is that sense of it's not even a love of learning, is it, that doesn't work? It's a love of learning or doing it in a particular way, because like I say, if you can almost immediately see if the circumstances are different or the way that it's coming across is different, and the like I say the face lights up, or you can see that passion starting to go, it's just that it doesn't work in a way that it ought to, in inverted commas, that we're sort of told, it's about inclusion in school, but only still included in a way which is right for the majority or the thing that works best in the system that's already there. And so,
I think
yeah,
the first thing we miss with inclusion is we don't ask how people would like to be included. That's
yes,
very individual, isn't it?
yeah,
It's like, would you like to be included in this? Good grief, no, is fine.
yeah,
That's not inclusion at that point. That's forcing.
yeah,
So
exactly.
it's very difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I feel for the system. It's. I'm a police officer by experience, like 28 years of serving in investigation roles, and it's the same across our services. It's not just teaching.
Mhm.
It's a lot of friends that work in the health service, and you can see it's really struggling to tick boxes in the system. It's losing the value. So, for me, education is about a lifelong love of learning, how to learn, where to go, and how to find yourself
Yeah,
in that, so that really we all know if you do something you love, you don't work a day in your life, really, do you?
absolutely.
It's a joy. You don't get sick and you don't get any of these problems because you're just loving life.
Yeah,
Um, but if we've become all about the metrics, and we have across so many of our systems, we've lost the magic that Sir Ken Robinson talks about. We were saying earlier,
mm,
he talks about that magic, that gift of teaching, and that gift of, community law enforcement. If we lose the gift that those skills, those skilled at those work, at those types of work, that we lose that because we've systemized it and it's over measured, and there's no ability to really include, because community is all about inclusion.
for sure. And I think I also think the amazing thing is that we talk about well-being and we talk about doing what people need to do to survive in their best possible way, but there's still this distinct difference between a physical need and an emotional need or a well-being need or whatever that happens to be. Because if you have a child in your school who's in a wheelchair, then there needs to be an obvious provision, whether that's changing the room, whether it's having a lift, whatever it happens to be. And yet we have more people in need that don't have a visible disability, but we're not able to make that difference, or we're not able to go and give them what they need yet. You wonder whether that will change or whether just the sheer numbers are going to make it really difficult. But like you say, it does need a complete rethink in order to support the majority of people in that sort of mainstream situation.
Absolutely. And even the buildings that we have, some of them can be really unkind, not, for physical disability, but we would necessarily consider that accessibility on that basis, but we don't think about lighting, and we don't think about the loudness for non-visible disability. And you
Yeah.
think, or different ability, as I prefer to think about it, is a different skill. It's just not, it may not be typical, and it may be harder to measure against a standard that possibly doesn't apply anymore.
Yeah. And I love the way you sort of made that distinction between sort of the learning and for how long. I've just been recording a series with Professor Dr. Gare Grace about his book Through a Different Lens. And that whole thing about schooling is, the 15 years or so when you're young, but education is 0 to 99. It's about giving people the skills and the love that they need for all of their life. I think we all know as adults we're learning all the time. I certainly didn't learn about podcasting when I was at primary school or even in secondary school, but the love of finding something that kind of worked, is something that happens all the time, and it's such a key element.
I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. And I think there are we still have very systemized approach to, careers and learning, and the careers are changing vastly, aren't we? We do
Yeah,
not know what the future looks like. It's quite possible that my son's career doesn't exist yet.
yeah,
He could create something. And I think being open to that doesn't have to be as individual as it is for home ed people or those looking at alternative methods of education at the moment, or alternative methods of learning. As you say, it's a lifelong thing, and I've had to really work on that with both of my children, to explain that mistakes are actually a fundamental part of learning. They're not a self-critique, and they're not something you take away and beat yourself up about. They're a first class look at, that didn't work.
yeah.
So why
Absolutely.
didn't it work? And being kind to yourself about that and forgiving yourself for that. And I think sometimes that big yucky cross that you get against things, it's possibly, going a little deeper than maybe we think it does. Maybe if you're getting too many of those crosses, that really isn't. You're going to start learning the wrong things. Don't make a mistake.
Yeah.
Fear of making a mistake is, that's not learning.
Yeah. My hope, I think, is that with the world of AI coming and, like say, the way people are going to be having different jobs and just a different lifestyle, is that if you don't have a traditional setting of learning that everybody just assumes is school or whatever, in some ways kind of puts you, say, ahead of the curve, because everybody's different and their circumstances are there. But that kind of, if I do this plus this plus this, I do primary, secondary, university, or apprenticeship or whatever, then my life is then set up. But like I say, that life isn't set up for anything that we know about now, and it's going to be very changed. So actually knowing that you can take ownership of it, even if it's the support of your family that can see that you need to take ownership of it when you're younger, or as you get older, to say, no, actually this isn't right for me, I'm going to learn in this way. There, what are my options? Does it have to look this traditional way, or can I do it a different way? I think that's just going to give the skills and the opportunity and the experience in the environment that you need to thrive going forward, whatever that may look like.
Yes, yeah, I completely agree. And I think when I look at co-workers and people that I'm with now that some just leaving school or just leaving university, they get a little lost with that lack of script.
Yeah.
And sometimes you really need that script. I mean, it was the same myself. I'd only done the work that I've been doing. So I felt quite genuinely nervous at the idea of not doing it. I thought,
Yes.
well, actually, is my identity attached a little bit to this? Am I have I told myself that I am just this? And when in fact we talk about it as adults as transferable skills, don't we? We
Yeah.
talk about about these qualities that we have, but I don't think we necessarily teach our youngest minds or encourage our youngest minds to understand that there's a lot of movement. It's not scripted. It's we aim for something, and there are several branches that could fall off of that. And being open to those possibilities is where you're going to find a love of something. If your spark is here at the moment, our spark is rugby. We have a big rugby spark going on. We have a lot of singing going on as well, but we have a big rugby spark going on, and it's just beautiful to sit and watch the autonomy that comes with that natural interest without applying pressure to it that it's got to look like a certain thing or it's got to end up being like that. Take the end result away and just enjoy where you are now and get the very most out of that you can. Just
Yeah.
I think sometimes we forget we're so busy planning for a future. We don't know what it looks
For
like.
sure.
Be in the moment, be in the now, and you feel well at that particular moment. I think that's the key to
Mm.
keeping yourself well and healthy is to actually be in that moment. And the day that you're not liking it, if it becomes a pattern of not liking it, you need to find another direction. There's nothing wrong with you doing that. That's just finding another direction. It's okay.
Yeah. And I think anyone who's got enough experience in life to know that my life as 20-year-old isn't the same as it is as a 40-year-old or whatever it happens to be. And so you can see it with that perspective, but like I say, harder to make those differences when maybe there's only a few years in
Yeah.
between. So for those people listening who are thinking, this sounds like something maybe I need to do to support my child, or maybe, like say, keep trying to reinvent the wheel within the traditional system isn't working, and there are people out there like yourself who've changed it. How did that look, first of all? Was it just a question of, right, that's the end of school, we're going to do it ourselves? How do I do it myself? How much support do I need? Where do I go? So just sort of those sort of initial thoughts and conversations to kind of get that ball rolling.
Yeah, it was a very big uh, conversation with the school about what was working, what wasn't working. And when the list of what wasn't working was longer than the list of what was working, and the value that our child had and that we had as his family supporting him, the value was all in the stuff that wasn't working.
Mhm.
That was when we chose to withdraw. And I think that's as individual as we all are. But if anybody is at that stage, we do try to support people as our business. We build a community of a very non-judgmental space that says, that just acknowledges that this is where you are. It's a safe place to put that. This is what I'm considering, and try to help signpost people to the myriad of possibilities that are now out there of you can part-time, school with some schools. You might find that withdrawing just a little bit and reducing subjects, maybe that works for you. Maybe it is a complete withdrawal because your child is not emotionally ready for that kind of socialization. Because as much as I've heard repeatedly from school environments that we're not here to socialize. It's also the very first thing they say when you withdraw your child from school is, what about their social skills? I'm thinking, I think we have to recognize there is some socialization going on in that environment, in the peer group. And if that's not working, that it's okay to withdraw and either try again or withdraw completely. You don't have to make those absolute cut-off decisions. If you're not going to be attending school, it's got to be in liaison with the school. You're not asking for permission to leave, but you are explaining that if you're deciding not to co-educate with the school, so part-time home, part-time school, if you can't get that working, then you would need to withdraw your child from the register. That would be a legal obligation. Otherwise, you're going to start getting notices of home education. And then you're explaining what you believe home education is going to look like for your child, not for every other child, for your child. And it can be very specific and put them right at the very center of it. So my child's interests have moved through doing his bookwork because he was mimicking and copying what he thought was expected before he started to find the exploration in learning. And then we just started documenting that and how you can document that. It doesn't have to be in writing. It can be video recorded. It could be podcasted. It could be a blog. It could be a myriad of ways that you're actually recording this information. But I think it's important for parents to help their children record that learning journey so that, should there ever be questions asked about what they've done or anything, you've got that there. It doesn't have to be a book though. And people get very, there's value, of course, but if your child's not connecting there yet, it doesn't mean it won't happen ever. It just means it's not at that particular stage. So there's also an awful lot of online resources that can help support the learning. So if it's not your subject matter, like space for me was not a subject matter, I soon became a little bit more conversant because my son was interested in it. So you suddenly end up learning alongside them. And that's really powerful too, when you're learning alongside your child and they're they're watching you discover and they're watching you light up with a new bit of information. I think they're getting the same kind of response as being able to be with a peer learning at that particular point. So my son actually quite enjoys it if I don't know something about a subject, and he's very happy to teach me.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing that people will say is, I'd love that to be the case, but I'm both of the parents maybe are both working, or we can't
Yeah.
afford to spend the time. And I don't mean it in that way, but just
I
the
understand.
realities of life are that I don't see
Yeah,
how that would practically work. What was sort of
yeah,
that
that's
experience for you?
very real experience. As I've spent several years saying to my child, you have to go to school because I have to go to work. And that's really sad for me to have been so stuck on that for quite some period of time. But it is a very real issue. I have a mortgage to pay. We have this, we have that. When you're coming back to your values, you start to understand, well, what can I do is probably the place to start, is rather than allow the block to come in as a repetition. You have to go to school because I have to go to work. What can I do was, let me have a look at all of my assets. Let me have a look at where I do have some maneuverability. Could I be part-time? Could I join an education group, a home learning group? Is there an ability here to work and educate at the same time? Is there a different type of schooling, Steiner schooling, Montessori schooling? Is there a different kind of learning? Is my child so autonomous and of an age where they are actually wanting to take charge of their own learning? It just doesn't tick the curriculum box as yet. Um, maybe a more varied curriculum. Maybe they're in that particular space. But there's there's so many ways now that the challenge I think is for us as the adults in the picture to challenge our thinking process, challenge our beliefs and challenge our values. And my family are the highest value that I have. So it's no good me going to work and putting a load of money in the bank and the and the roof over my head pay for if my child is in a desperate place at that particular point. It's what can shift, and that's individual again for each of us. For both of us, we hit at around the time of COVID, so it gave us 3 to 4 months to think about the transition of one of us had already been furloughed and let go. The other was on a 0 hours contract because we were in such a crisis point at that point. So 0 hours contracts are very risky for families, but can you downsize? Can you renting out our home, moving into a motorhome, cost of living went down massively. So it enabled us to do quite a lot on quite a tight budget. So it doesn't have to be all about the money. It can be, it's as individual as we all are. I'm not a financial advisor, but it was taking that whole picture of what my husband and I and our children all brought to the table to see what could move and what couldn't. So you have to open your mind at that point
Mhm.
to possibility. There are other ways of doing this, and I think it's more relevant now than it ever has been that we don't have to leave people in distress. There are not necessarily, if you're not getting the services support, which I understand that they're in crisis points, I really do, but it's coming back to your values to live your life well. Because when my children are happy, it's easy for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I
It's easy,
think
isn't it?
I think it's such an important thing, isn't it,
Mm,
in terms of right, we want something to be different, and it might be that you've got to crisis and you think this just can't carry on, or you might not be there but you're thinking this really isn't working, and rather than it has to look like this, because it's like,
mm,
what do we think it could look like and how do we make that work? It's a little bit like I've had conversations with people before saying, yes, even within the school system, we all need a set of new IT related things and computers. It's going to cost us a fortune. We can't have that. We don't have the budget, which is one way of thinking. The other way is, how do we find the money that we need in order to do this and set it up so that long term it's not about getting these computers now, it's how do we get them whenever we need them in the future, and then the whole
mm.
ethos of what you're doing changes. And I think this is the same sort of thing. It's that kind of, we don't want life to look like it looks like now, so therefore what can we do to make that difference? And I love the fact that you say it's so personalized, because that's what we're talking about, is everything should be personalized more and more the way that we do it. And so is it part-time? Is it changing this? Is it changing that? I know when our children were young, we decided that one of us, we wanted to make sure that one of us was always at home, and we were both self-employed, so we could make that decision. And you're right, there are implications that come with that. But now with our children having left home, I wouldn't change a day of it. And like I say, you make that choice for a real reason, don't you?
That's it. It's a very real reason that you make that choice. Absolutely. And like us, it wasn't that we suddenly lost our skills or anything overnight. It was just going to look a little differently
Mm.
because the environments we worked in could not be flexible at the point that we needed some flexibility. They weren't able to be flexible. So it really was, okay, we're reimagining what work looks like. And I wrote. So I've always wanted to write, and I thought I've never had the time to write because I'm busy.
Yeah.
Like, and now I have time to write. I can reflect on how we got to where we were. And I published my first book, and I never really, this was a dream of mine that I've now managed to realize thanks to my son not managing in school, saying, no, actually, that's not for me. And why did I start writing? Because he started writing. He was making time to write about the animal that he felt lived inside him. What he's talking about is emotion. He's talking about big emotion, and he identifies big emotions as animal types. And he was talking about the animal living inside him. And I said, that would make a great book. And he's there using a dictaphone writing. And I said, that's fabulous. The microphone, sorry, not a
Yeah,
dictaphone.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
dictating into the microphone
Yeah.
on his computer. He was like, I don't even have to type. And I thought, you're fabulous. You
Mm.
are absolutely fabulous. Do that. Then I'll teach you how to go back and look over your work and punctuate and grout. And we'll just, and it became a natural path rather than right, we're going to learn about semicolons today and we're going to learn about punctuation today. Instead of separating it in his mind, it was bringing it together with what he was already doing. And it was just a different way of learning. It needed to be more holistic for him to make the connections. And holistic is is definitely a word that gets bandied around here quite a lot.
Yeah.
It's a holistic thing. Rugby teaches us way more than just the sport and the rules and the attitude and the well-being and the nutrition and the it's got so much falling out of rugby. Um, Time suddenly made sense because he was looking at space. It made no sense. He had a complete disconnect from the idea of time because it's just a watch on his wrist. Where on earth does that come from? When we understood that, going right the way back to the planets and the sun and the rotation and the seasons and this is why we do it
Yeah.
because the bus is going over there.
Yeah.
So, but it had to be this huge, long, holistic thing for him to go, now I understand. I
And
understand my place in that.
And the most ridiculous thing is the fact that that's the reason we learned anything you would think historically. You know, I'm
Yes.
learning this because it needs to serve me. It needs to be relevant to what I'm doing. If I'm learning about growing something in the ground, it's because I need to eat. I need to understand how this works in order for me to survive. You know, like I say, if you're if I need to explain something, or say that the semicolon idea is everyone starts to go, oh my word, I don't even remember how that worked. Um, but if it's that kind of, you spend all that time and wonder of being able to sort of record something which is really important to you, you
Mm,
then also want to make sure that people understand it. Or if it does have to be printed out or it needs to look a certain way, there's a reason for that because it needs to be a way that people then understand it. So it's got purpose rather than it's 10 o'clock on a Monday and now it's time to do this, which, like you say, has no benefit
spelling
or
test.
understanding. Exactly. But
Exactly.
I just think there's sort of a fundamental human reality to that, whatever the subject or what it is that you're trying to learn. And I think you can understand why that complete sort of connection is so supportive for people, no matter sort of whether they have a disability or not, or whether they are in mainstream school or not, because it's got purpose to it.
No, I don't think I'm the only adult out there that had several penny drop moments when they left school. I was like, oh, that's why.
Yeah,
I hadn't made the link. I hadn't made
yeah,
the connection. And
yeah,
for whatever reason, we throw a lot of mud at the wall, don't we, in a classroom? And some of it sticks and some of it doesn't. Well, obviously, some of it didn't quite stick with me, and I hadn't understood why that was the way it was
yeah,
and why things happened the way they did. And so many penny drop moments. And I'm watching them happen with my own children, thinking we don't have that holistic connection going through our education system any more than we do through our health system or our system of justice either. There's a lot of confusion around that. So I think these are the fundamental points that are missing, and hopefully with this change, and I think we'd all agree we're in a period of quite intense change right now. People really are understanding that there are different ways of doing things, and the creatives are really coming into their own to bring something different. And I think it's needed.
yeah.
I really do think it's needed. The idea that my son can find you online and he can listen and he can tune in and he can learn that way. I think that's incredible. There's never been so much information out there as there is now. The trick is not being overwhelmed by it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that all comes down to that perspective again, doesn't it? Is that it's not about I need to do it all now. It's that today's another journey. I'm going to find
Yeah.
something and I might think that's rubbish. I might think this is something I just love and I want to get more and more of it. I mean, I have the same thing. It's like for music, you find an album that's, 20 or 30 years old and you're like, oh, wow, if I'd only known about this before. Or a podcast, you think there's 100 episodes here and I can literally spend however long I like just sort of immersing myself in these people's conversations and thoughts. And you just think, yeah, that's just amazing, and
That's it.
I love it.
That's living well, isn't
Yes,
it?
exactly.
That is living well, is to be able to find those things that you love. And there is so much now out there. I don't think we need to be as scripted as we are.
Yeah, for sure. So that's a great sort of way into where I was wanting to make sure everyone understood. Like I say, you said your life looked very one dimensional when you sort of traditional jobs,
Mm,
kids going to school, as it were,
yeah,
and now it obviously
yeah.
looks very different. And we've talked about that sort of transition and why. But what does your life look like now, from in terms of, like say, there's the schooling, but then there's also the writing the book, and then there's all the other things that you're doing as well. So sort of take us into how that looks and why it's supportive and how it sort of changed your perception of what your life can be and how you want it to be, I guess, is probably the most important thing.
The best thing about it is it slowed down. it slowed down to be able to actually enjoy it, to be actually to feel like I'm living and not just running a process. I'm not. I've gone from an alarm clock and getting up in the morning and the breakfast and the school run and the running into work and then meeting everybody's deadlines and targets and everything else, and then hoping that you're ticking the boxes and doing enough, and then coming back home and doing the dinner and hoping it's nutritious and delicious and all of the things, because I'm not a chef, I'm a mum who cooks. And and yeah, it's gone from that to we gravitate together um, around the house, through the kitchen, through life. This is my interest right now. Oh, this is my interest right now. So how do we meet those? How do we find those? You're really interested in Greek history. Can we take a trip to Greece out of school holiday time? Where it's so much cheaper as well to hop on a plane and
Yeah.
just go. Can you do that? It's where can we find the learning? Where can we find the way through? So at the moment, like I say, it's rugby. Rugby's very, very topical at the moment. So we have a rugby coach. My husband has re-qualified as a personal trainer. He's teaching children and and others about strength and conditioning and health, and they'll have access to people talking about good nutrition, where food meets your body. My son has a little bit of a head start on that because we've detoxed his body from that. It's a whole different conversation, really, but it's about the sort of gut-brain connection when it comes to autism, and
Yeah.
there was quite a connection for our child. It's not to say that is the case for every child, but we noticed a gut issue with our child from a very, very young age, and that was what the detective in me wanted to explore. That was the writing on the wall that needed looking at. And when we settled his gut, and information that we share in our communities and groups through Gemini Directions, is that, there, if you're noticing issues with the gut, there are places you can start here with nutrition and everything else that may support some of the symptoms that we're commonly seeing with ADHD and autism. If the gut brain is a thing and the one misfiring can cause an issue with the other. So we have a much calmer child after the nutrition change. So he's got a little bit of a head start for the rugby, um, and how to stay calm. If he's feeling particularly anxious, he'll find a natural product. He knows foods that will help him do that. So that's really useful. That's where our interest in cacao came from, which again is another sort of conversation. But they're all side parts to the learning journey that we have all had as a family, and that is what life looks like for us right now. Is the whole family are learning together how to live our best lives. And most days we are checking in. Is this in, does this feel good?
And
Do I
just
feel well?
yeah,
Yeah.
and just sort of talk a little bit about sort of Gemini directions, because I think that sense of community is something that everybody is really feeling now. Like you say, there's sort of a shift, isn't there? So take us into sort of what you do, how you sort of support people, how that's sort of part of your life as well for those people who haven't come across it.
Sure. Well, my son started it. He started talking about vibration, crystals, vibration. Fell down the rabbit hole of IBM's Marcel Vogel, crystal technology, and he kind of merged the metaphysical and the and the technology at the same time, which I thought was fascinating. But it started us looking at what it is to live well, whether you're looking at terms like your ikigai, finding your ikigai, whether you're looking at Reiki and energy. These are the things that started to come in, and Gemini Direction started there, very much looking at the energy of feeling well and being aligned to live your best life. And then it branched out quite a bit over the years. Since I wrote my book as well, we've had families make contact to say, I'm in this position. And I thought that there would be a useful community space. So that is currently under development. So you won't find it on the website at the moment, but you will soon. If you want to sign up, then you can get information. If you want to join in, it's a completely free space. for families that are possibly struggling because systems are struggling. So rather than blaming each other, it's a place to come where you can just be held safely to talk about whatever's going on at that particular point to help you get unstuck because most people find their own way through getting unstuck. It's it's through the stuck that we're finding really hard and getting access to services right now is really, really difficult. So community, I think, is the way that we always have historically supported each other, and we need to come back to that. So I know that it's been incredibly useful for us to have the charities that have been supporting us throughout this journey. So I'm talking about the autism charities that gave us all the information we needed, including access to resources if money was tight, whether that was sensory library resources or whether that was books and the people who knew and the parents who had been there, and suddenly your community changes, and it's quite a beautiful thing. So we wanted to capture that as well. So there are communities for people that look at the metaphysical, and there are communities for those that are the alchemy that you mentioned at the very beginning is the for us, it's taking the base feeling and finding your gold in that. Where is it? Where are you going? Where are you heading? Where do you find your fire? Yeah. So
Yeah.
you're talking about the fire. It's where do you find that fire?
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Mm.
I should give you a script because you've managed to do this brilliantly throughout our conversation, ready to ready to the next stage. And of course, by that I mean obviously the acronym FIRE is really important to us, and we talk that in
Mm.
terms of feedback, inspiration, resilience, and empowerment. What is it that strikes you when you see that, either collectively or any words individually?
Oh, all of it. It's a holistic thing. It's all of it, all together. There has to be the feedback that we're getting at the moment is that our systems are not able to meet the crisis point that many of us are at or approaching. It's going to take some inspiration. You're probably feeling it if you're looking at podcasts like this to do something different. I know teachers that are suddenly setting up schools
Hmm.
to do something different. They are inspiring, absolutely inspiring. I know officers that are looking at investigation in a very different way. I know communities that are coming together. This is the inspiration. It is out there, it's happening. You just might need signposting to it. And there are people like me out there ready to help their community, they're ready to help. Resilience, we've all got, we all need it. It's that learning to have something go wrong and where to find your own tools to come back. How do I come back from this? How do I grow from this? How do I move on from this? That's the key to resilience, I think, is not how many times can you be hit. It's when you know it's not going right, what tools do you have to put yourself back into alignment with your values? Because everything else will ripple from that. So and that's the empowerment, the fact that you come back to your values. When you sit there, you feel quite powerful again to say, okay, we've had quite a kicking over this time. We could have stayed very much in this box of your son is failing. He's not doing well. He can't meet these. It doesn't matter what we do. That's massively disempowering. To come back to it as a value, as this is a human being finding his own way that needs some love, care, support, possibly in a different metric than maybe average. I don't even know how to term that, to be honest with you, but I know what was needed and it wasn't there. So it's empowering to take that back for yourself and then watch it ripple.
Yeah.
And that's how you find your community. So your fire is, yeah, it's a holistic thing. It's whole.
Uh, I love that. Thank you for putting it in that way. And the resilience thing, I think, is a really important one for me as you were talking about it, because what struck me was the fact that it happens in so many different ways, doesn't it? You know, it can be, I just need the 5 minutes today. I just need, it doesn't need to be a complete reset. I don't need to have been knocked over in order to then find that resilience to do it. It's lots of different things in lots of different ways. And one of the things that I do is Alexander technique. And the reason I do it is, as a musician, I
Mhm.
found that my body was in all sorts of places, my mind was in all sorts of places, and the ability just to reset on a regular basis just meant that it gave me that opportunity then to keep going, to keep doing the next thing. And it's not like I need to do this or the world stops. It's just that I need to do this in order to, like I say, to be in the best place to make the next decision or the next thing that I need to do, or to take that next sort of thought. And I love the fact that it can be something small, but as we know, all those small things end up to be the big things, don't they? And that's kind of the most important
Absolutely.
thing.
My small thing is like your it's what's in my cup.
Hmm.
I put cacao in my cup and I sit with my cup and I have my 10 minutes and it sets me for the day. And it's become my space, my place to go to. And even my little boy will walk in and is like, "Have you got your cup?" I'll come back."
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. and and I think, just to wrap up, I think the title of, the magic of not fitting in, I think the reason I love that so much as a title is the fact that once you sort of release yourself from feeling like it has to look a certain way, then the world looks magical, doesn't it? Everything looks like a possibility. And from the number of the conversations I've had on this podcast, talking about you know online schools where you can just do some things. I've just literally been recording the intro for one about a love-based micro school. Just you just kind of think there's just so many different things there. Or within the traditional system, being able to learn to do this or to do that, whatever it happens to be, because everyone's different and your circumstances are different. To be able to sort of share those things as we have today is such a real pleasure. So, Victoria, thank you so much indeed. I really do appreciate your time and all the wisdom that you've done. And we'll have links to the website and all that stuff in the show notes as well, so people can
Oh,
click
thank you,
through
Mark.
and find out even more. So, yeah, thank you so much indeed.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for having this space. It's awesome.
Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.